Next class, where we continue to look at leadership development in our own lives and also in the lives of others. In this class, we want to look at a number of theories or models for leadership and how that helps us to understand development. Firstly, there's the question of traits. That is, do some people have the traits that we're looking for? Many people often describe leadership in terms of traits like being outgoing, like having enthusiasm, being able to stir people up. And sometimes this can look very powerful, but some of the worst of leaders can also be those who have these sorts of traits as well. And sometimes the quieter leader, the less outgoing, can be the more successful. So, trait theories propose that leaders often have certain qualities that we like, such as confidence. And we must admit that when someone who's confident walks into the room and says, "This is how we should do it because," and they give a reason, often there's a tendency to want to follow them. Thomas Carlyle is famous for saying that certain people have certain traits and they shape history. And researchers such as Ralph Stogdill challenged this and said often there's much more involved, and just because a person seems confident or seems to have knowledge or seems to be determined or decisive does not mean that they are the best person to lead. Often, if we don't step in and appoint a leader will emerge, and often those leaders will be those who show the most confidence and determination. So there will be natural emerging leaders, but they won't necessarily be the best. Often, if there's an appointed leader by the organisation, they will reflect on other values, and every organisation may have different values. An organisation that holds strongly to tradition may in fact appoint a leader who holds to the tradition most strongly. And so appointed leaders often have different qualities to naturally emerging leaders. But again, they aren't necessarily the ideal, but they do have the greater support of those who appoint them, and therefore there's a certain stability and confidence in the leaders because there's stability and confidence in trust in the organisation. Trait theory, where we look to confident, charismatic leaders, has some truth in that they are often the leaders who emerge with visible qualities. There can be other traits that we can look for that are very valuable as well, such as integrity and honesty. And if you look around a room of 10, 20 people, there'll be different people that you'll trust for different reasons. Some may have greater knowledge, some may have greater stability, some may communicate in a clearer way, some may have greater caring and empathy. We're all different. And so careful prayer and waiting on God is needed before we appoint certain leaders. Scholars often warn that over-reliance on a charismatic, outgoing leader can lead to the neglect of focusing on character formation or accountability or responsibility or attention to detail or emotional maturity or wisdom. Often, a lot of care is needed in selecting leaders and in developing leaders in order to encourage the development of all of the aspects of character and life that are important in leadership. And we also need to remember that often we want just one leader, and we have to prayerfully select, will it be the outgoing extroverted or the introverted? We need to think, what is the leader who's most situated to the situation? And this can be called situational leadership. Situational leadership thinks about the needs of a particular situation, and sometimes we may need someone who's more outgoing, but someone we might want a more introverted or quieter leader. Different situations may require different leadership. A practical implication of leadership development is that churches should identify the leaders that are most needed for the actual settings that are there. If you've got an older group of people, then maybe you want someone who's suited to them. Or if you're wanting to build more younger people, then you may want a younger leader. Leadership identification can involve a number of steps, including thinking about the spiritual gifts that people have or the different personality inventories. And a personality inventory is a particular skill for looking at the different personalities that people have. And so we could do a search on personalities and personality inventories. Some you can pay for and some come free. But personality inventories look at the different types of personality. So there's a Hogan personality inventory, Big Five model. The Big Five model measures how open are people to new ideas and other people. Conscientious and detailed. How conscientious and detailed are they? How outgoing and able to work with others, and how agreeable are they in working with others? How do they handle stress? How do they handle tolerance? So I think the Big Five model of personality inventory is a very useful one. And let's take a little bit more of a look at the Big Five model of personality. And I'll get you to write down some aspects of the Big Five model of personality. So the Big Five model of personality measures what is often considered to be aspects of personality that are going to be useful in leadership. And some of us have more or less of these natural abilities, and some are able to develop these abilities more or less than others more easily. So the first one is, to what extent is a person open to new ideas, new ways of doing things? Often in an organisation or church, we want people who are creative and open to new ideas. While sometimes, if you want to preserve what you have, you might go for someone who is more practical or traditional or routine oriented. So in some activities, you want a leader who's more tradition, more practical or routine oriented and less focused on the open experience. Same with conscientiousness. Often there'll be some people who are more detailed, reliable, disciplined. Others who are more creative and artistic may be more spontaneous or relaxed. You have to think, what sort of leader do we want and need? Extroverted, some are more outgoing and relational. Others might be quieter and introverted. Some might get on more easily with others, and some might want to challenge others more. Some might want to be more empathetic and cooperative and agreeable. Others might want to be more skeptical and questioning. Again, you have to think through, what sort of leader are we looking for? And then there is emotional stability. And some naturally have more emotional stability, and some might have more mood swings and irritability. Interestingly, sometimes songwriters or story writers or poets may have mood swings or anxiety or irritability. It's not necessarily always a bad thing, but it's part of the different makeup that we have and the ways in which different people are suited to different occupations and workplaces and jobs. Another very useful strategy is a reflective autobiography, which we did using Robert Clinton. And in the reflective autobiography, we begin to reflect on our life story. So an autobiography is your life story, and a reflective autobiography reflects on events in your life. And as a leader reflects on events in their life, then they can identify events that are helpful and events that are challenges that they've faced that have shaped some of the ways they view aspects of life. And so reflective autobiographies are ways of looking at life and our own life, their journal keeping, memoir writing, in which we write about our life journey. And so you might want to think about how your life unfolds. Now, reflective autobiography can be used in leadership and in church leadership, development, helping people to develop understandings of themselves as they reflect on their life journey. A reflective autobiography in your own life or a leader's life can help us understand how we respond to different moments in life, different experiences, why we've developed the values that we have because of the world we live in, why we hold different values and trust. And we can also understand why we hold certain convictions and theological convictions and spiritual values. So churches will often use a autobiography where people reflect and write about themselves to help us to understand how God's at work in their lives and how they're handling challenges in life. The Leader's Journey by Jim Harrington is another, like Robert Clinton's, resource that helps us to understand the person's journey. So Jim Harrington, Leader's Journey, can be a valuable resource that's worth looking at and thinking about further. Jim Harrington, The Leader's Journey. And in this book, Jim Harrington encourages us to reflect on the sense of call in our lives and in the place where we're called to work. He reminds us that we're called to transformation and growth through our life journey. And just as the natural world, there's transformation and growth in our life. There's need to understand processes in the development of our thinking, processes in the development of our sense of identity, and in our relationships one with another. All can be important aspects of our development. We can also ask others to think about and tell us about how we are going and how life is going. And feedback from others, I think, is very, very helpful. We can do interviews with people and ask what are their values. We can encourage people in communication exercises, and sometimes in class we might get people to talk one to another and then to reflect on how their relationship one with another unfolded. So there's lots of different ways in which we can engage and learn through reflecting. So let's have a look now at some further theories for understanding leadership and how these influence our understanding of the development of leadership. Some would say that leadership should be oriented towards certain tasks. And so if you're asked to plant a church, then you want a leader who has experience and knowledge and skills that are required for church planting. So you think about the task, such as church planting, or you think about youth, and you think about what's the sort of skills that we want for the youth. Alternatively, there could be certain values that we see as important, such as prayer or preaching or worship or music. And so it's the values that we see as important that we promote. So behavioral theories or task theories or values theories look for what leaders do and what's required in the task in order to understand what development is needed. Youth pastors, for example, are often asked to organise events. So we're looking for people who can organise, and we're looking to develop their skills in organisation. They may need to safeguard the people or coordinate volunteers, and therefore we look for people who have these skills, and we also look to promote the development of these skills. We may look for youth leaders who can teach Bible, and we think about how they teach, we interview them, and we look for the skills they have, but we also look to develop the skills. And the skills that a person has at the moment may be quite different to the skills that they're able to develop over the next year or two. If someone's asked to counsel, we may look at the skills they have, look at the training we can give them, and look at the ways in which they can develop. And they may too look at what their goals are, what they have a passion for, interest in, and skills in. Same with working with parents. Again, all of these different types of leadership may require different skills to be developed and different abilities. One of the ways that we can develop these leadership skills is through role play, such as we might do a role play of a pastoral conflict. That is, someone in the church is going to challenge the church, and they may say they're upset about something, and then how would you respond? And we might get someone to speak, and we could role play how we would handle these different challenges that emerge. So role play can be very valuable. We might do an event planning exercise where we say we're going to do a church planting. And so how could we develop this church planning? And so we'd get in a group and we'd talk about how we would do a church plan and planting a church. And we might go around and visit people, encourage people, develop a team. All of this could be a planning exercise that we could do. We could do a volunteer coordination exercise where we discuss how would you work with volunteers in order to build the team. We could prepare people for preaching sermons, and we could talk about how would you develop your skills in putting together a sermon and preaching, and we might do 5-minute preaching opportunities. We could do pastoral visitation training where we might talk about how would you respond to the needs of people who are sick or in need, and you go and visit them. We might practice before we go. We could practice communication. We could practice planning. So there's many exercises that we could do to develop our skills. So leadership development can often involve practice of different ways we do things. So leadership development, there could be practice that we could do to develop our leaders. Situational leadership, as I mentioned before, recognises that leadership is often related to particular situations and settings. And so let's have a look now at situational leadership. And Paul Hersey and Ken Blanchard are quite famous for their situational leadership model. And their model challenges us that there are different situations in which there is different needs and different responses. Particularly famous is the idea that initially, when you're leading, you don't focus so much on the actual getting everyone involved so much as clearly outlining what needs to be done. And this is called the delegating approach. And it's followed by other approaches at other stages in the leadership. So initially, you're not wanting to say that you've been working together for a long time and this is where things are. You're wanting to say, hey, we're beginning, and in the beginning, we need to clarify where we're going, what we're doing, what needs to be done. So this is the delegating stage. Next, we tell, we say, this is what we want done. Can you do it? How will you do it? So we begin to focus on direction more. We focus more on supervising. We focus more on working with people. As people get better at doing the task, we can trust them more. And so we can simply have reports on how's the youth going. And then we can give them more space and room. And then finally, we can simply work on keeping the relationship going because we can trust them even more. If you've not written this down already, can you write down Hasey, Hasey, Blanchard, Blanchard, situational leadership, in which they propose that often leadership can begin initially wanting clarity, wanting direction, and then working things through so that we trust people more, working things through even further so we keep an eye on reports and what's happening, and then finally we move towards the relationships more. That is, we begin by delegating, and then we support, and then we coach. So we move through, initially we might be directing more strongly, then we coach and encourage, then we support, and then we delegate. So that's one way of understanding the model as it flows through from one to the other, from the right to the left. You begin by delegating, you begin by directing, then you move to coaching, then supporting, and then delegating. So can I get you to write down the S1, S2, S3, S4 model from Blanchard and Hersey? Directing comes first, where we say, this is where we're going, this is what's needed. And then comes coaching and support and helping. And then we can step back a bit and just provide the support that's needed. And then finally, we can trust them to do the task. So this is a 4-step model of Hasey and Blanchard. And that's called the situational leadership model. Situational leadership theory, Hersey and Blanchard. And they argue that leadership develops through a number of stages. Transformational leadership suggests that the most important thing that is needed is change and development in people's lives. That is transformation and change. And so again, this leadership model says it's the capacity to encourage growth and development and change that's going to be most important. Servant leadership suggests that recognizing the call of God to serve is going to be central. Authentic leadership suggests that authenticity is needed. And in reality, all of these need to be combined together in order to develop the sort of leadership that we are needed. So finally, the task today is to think about leadership development. And so today we want you to discuss strategies for leadership development in your own life and in the life of others in the team and more widely. So we're looking again at doing 100 to 300 words, and we're looking at 3 references. And the task is asking us to discuss leadership development in your own life and in the life of others in the team and more widely. And so this is week. And so this is assignment 8. Discuss strategies for leadership development in your own life and the life of others in the team and more widely. And Robert Clinton and others have said that there is a number of stages, and so an awareness of these stages can be particularly important. And also an awareness of the many aspects of life that need to develop. Such as there's the emotional, there's knowledge, there's skills. All of these areas of life need to develop relationship, skills. So there's many areas of life need to develop as we develop. And Robert Clinton says these go through a number of stages. It is childhood, teenage, and in every area we want to encourage development. And a well-developed church supports and encourages the development of all the people through each stage of life. It shows grace and support, but also clarity and guidance. So do we have any questions about what our goal is for this task, assignment 8? We've got a number of resources that we've looked at. Do you need more time to write that down? Assignment 8, discuss strategies for leadership development in your own life and the life of others and in the team more widely. So we introduced a number of resources that we could use that would be useful as well. And so we can interact with some of those as well. So thank you each one for your focus and attention today. And thank you for the taken. I look forward to catching up tomorrow. Let me just pray as we draw to a close. Heavenly Father, we do thank you that you are speaking into our lives as we have reflected on the different stages of development in our lives. We can see times where things have flourished and gone well. We see that you are also able to help us and work with us during challenging times. Help us to continue to grow so that we might help others to continue to grow also, we pray. Amen. So thank you each one. I look forward to catching up tomorrow as we put together some of the ideas that we have been developing on leadership development. You're looking great. So well done. Look forward to
Thank you,
catching up.
sir. See you
Thank you.
tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
이제 exam? 어, 네.